Ah, there we are. It feels good to have information, doesn't it? Context. The truth is, that can really make a story, don't you think? But I do, however, still feel as if something's missing. Oh, that's what it is. We left a part of the story, didn't we? Well, let's leave no stone unturned. After all, a tale isn't complete unless you know all the pieces that make it. So, where were we? Oh yes, out in the woods, standing at the center of a massive crater created by the shock waves of silvery energy that his body emitted, stood Talion, down on all fours, nails dug into the earth, large horns protruding from the top of his head, reeling back behind him, and a thick white billowy fog enveloping the rest of his body, so that only his tail and his horns were visible through it, the rest of it forming a shape around him, not like that of a human, but more like that of a dragon. Even his mouth, or the foggy appearance that covered it, now resembled that of the more bestial form of a dragon, with his blue eyes glaring out, the glow even more intense than usual, what looks like blue fire burning within them, as he had simply just caught notice of his teacher in the distance. For a moment, Salus stood there stunned, not really sure what to do at this point. "Okay," Salus said, starting to move slowly in a clockwise circle. Are you in there, kid? Truth be told, I'd really like to know if you're all right in there. That little stunt was supposed to be the end of your training for the day. Congratulations, kid. Day 1 complete. You can go ahead and calm down now. There's really no need for all that bolster. Though that absorption is pretty interesting. Why don't you just calm down a bit and we can have a chat about it?" Talion, sitting there, fingers dug into the ground, glaring at him as he spoke, seemed to pay him no heed at all, simply watching him for the time being as he spoke, making that clockwise circle, his eyes laser-focused on him, his tail swaying ever so gently back and forth out of the fog that encompassed his form. Suddenly, his body tensed. Wind swept in towards him as he opened his mouth. For a moment, Salus thought that he might be trying to suck him in as well, maybe gobble him up. But the wind did not grow that intense, and was much shorter-lived. After absorbing a large gullet of air, Talon's stance seemed to widen for a moment, in a way that Silas had seen before, a very long time ago, and the memory sent chills up his spine. Oh, this is definitely bad. In an instant, Talion opened his mouth, once again, this time expelling a bolt of fire. A white-hot burning streak pulsed forward. The fog swept in around Silas, almost seeming to pick him up and move his body unnaturally, but still only barely managing to evade, as that white-hot beam widened, becoming a wall of flames of incredible intensity, tearing a streak through the forest as it ripped by. In the distance, the impact set off an explosion, so powerful that Silas could feel it. The moment he hit the ground, it was still shaking from the impact, fire everywhere, billowing into the skies. the forest completely ablaze. And as Silas looked over, the path where the beam of fire had carved its way through was melted down to nothing but ashes. There were no trees left, and the stone itself was melted to molten rock. And again, Talion reared back, breathing in for a moment. This time, Silas was on his guard, preparing for another bolt of fire. Instead, Talon simply roared. It was fierce. It seemed to vibrate the air itself, an earth-shattering roar that shook everything. Silas almost felt as if he was being forced back by the sound alone, his feet beginning to tear small grooves a foot or so back as the sound waves were pressing him. After the growl was over, that earth-shattering roar done, Talon widened his stance again, glaring with those draconic eyes directly at Silas. Silas could hear a fierce growl emoting from him, as if he was ready to fight, no intention of stopping, and prepared for anything, never taking his eyes off him. Silas had no idea what was going on. What the hell is this? He thought to himself. I definitely didn't expect a reaction like this. Is this because of his draconic blood? He doesn't seem like himself. If he was just pissed off, I'd expect some yelling or some sort of perhaps calling me an ass. But this definitely isn't that. And that is definitely way too much juice. Power behind that attack was enormous. Silas doesn't know how to concentrate his demonic energy. There's no way he could pull it. Sure, he has the energy for it, but with no way to focus or control it, he shouldn't be able to spout fire like that. Even the amount of fire he was able to produce before was more than I expected. Man, there are still so many questions, but it doesn't look like I'm gonna have time to work over them, Silas thought to himself. It's clear the kid's not himself, and like this, there's no telling how much damage he could do. I don't even know if that form is dangerous for him, or what the hell it is for that matter. If he doesn't have sense of himself, he probably wouldn't even recognize his mother. He could just as easily take her out with one of those blasts. So it looks like the only option is to take him out. I have to knock him unconscious. That way he doesn't kill me, his mother, or himself. This should be interesting. If he's able to use that level of power, I'm not going to be able to take him like this. I'm going to have to take it up. Fine, kid. You want to play? I think level 2 should be enough to do it. After all, I don't want to kill you. Okay, kid. You asked for it. Silas widened his stance for a moment, spreading his legs, lifting his arms up into the air. Let's go, kid. And with that, there was a massive shockwave that bolted out from him, spreading out in all directions, but not of energy. At least none that Silas would understand. No, it was a massive billowing cloud of fog, spreading out in all directions, so thick you couldn't see an inch through it, so heavy that the ground around him crumbled and tore apart as it spread out, spreading hundreds of feet wide in all directions, a massive sphere of solid white that just kept spreading wider and wider, but finally stopped its expansion as Talion stood in his crater, seeing the forming of that massive white orb, growling in its direction, preparing to strike. Suddenly, there was another gust of wind, going the opposite direction, as if everything was pulling in towards the center of that orb. All of the white began to dissipate in whirls and tornadoes, all swirling in towards the center. As it dissipated, seeming to focus and concentrate down to the center, a form began to emerge from it, becoming visible through the thick white. that slowly faded away as it all concentrated to his form. And there stood Silas, all of the fog being absorbed, brought in towards his form, now no longer dressed as he was before. Now it seemed as if the fog itself was taking the form of clothing wrapping around him. A long, billowing white cloak with a hood that seemed to flow like it was a breeze in the wind, rippling, flowing to the side, but there was no wind there to do it. Silas's eyes now glowed a bright white color, emanating a small white light forward in the direction that he peered, directly towards Talion, and an ever gentle amount of fog simply drifting off of all of it, from head to toe, and even the cloak itself, emitting that foggy aura about it. Level 2, Salas said. Phantom Cloak of Endless Dreams.